Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to our weekly immigration roundup where we discuss all things immigration in English. It's usually me here and Fidel Camposano, our firm administrator. You all know Fidel. And we do this English video so we can talk to you guys about what's happening in the world of immigration in English. And so, as per the usual, if you're watching and you have a question pop into your brain about immigration, go ahead and put it in the chat. We'd be happy to talk to you and share this with anyone that you think might want to see it, because today's topic is about marriage-based green card applications and when people get put into what's called the Stokes interview, that secondary interview where the officer explores and investigates this couple and whether they really have a valid marriage. This is the thing that people think of when they think of green card interviews based on marriage. There's been a lot of popular media about it. What was that movie with Sandra Bullock where she was Canadian? And the immigration officer was following them around. The Proposal. Do you remember that?
I know what you're talking about. Is that yes, I do remember.
Yeah. So anyway, there's this is what people think of when they think of the green card interview, is that they're all like this. The truth is that they're rarely like this, but when they are, it's a good idea to be ready for it. And so that's what we're talking about today. Fidel, how are you?
I'm doing well. I just realized this is the first time I'm on a live show with my new hair.
Woohoo!
Which is
love
interesting. But yes, feel free to comment, give us your reactions, thumbs up, some hearts. Everybody that's joining, please comment and give us your thoughts about what we're talking about. Also share the video so other people can know this very important information. I think I agree with you, Kate. It's like I was looking through the notes and I'm like, these are all the myths and everything you hear about when people worry about their interview is basically what we're going to talk about.
Yes. Oh, and you're already getting some hair love from Fernando. He likes the hair. Big thumbs up. It does look great. I love it. And it's a whole new thing when you have curls, managing curls versus straight hair.
It's been a whole learning experience for me.
It's all about the product.
Yes, that's what I've learned. At this point, I've tried 5 different ones.
Well, you didn't even ask me. I've been, going through all the products for life, so I've got feedback.
Should have started there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
cool.
Josh, thanks for the
but let's go ahead and jump into the topic, Kate. Because I know these interviews normally, and what people can see in the title, is called Stokes Interview.
Yeah.
Is that so? When did these happen, or what is the Stokes Interview to start off with?
Okay, so like many things in immigration and law, when it has a weird name like that, it's based on a case. So someone named Stokes was applying for a green card. It's actually a couple from Ghana, and they went through this secondary interview, and it forever after shall be called the Stokes Interview. And it is the name of the thing that is that secondary deep dive exploratory interview. So often it's rare that a couple will randomly get selected for a Stokes interview, although it could happen. So if you get notification that that's happening, I would say that's usually an indication that there's a red flag in your case. Absolutely, definitely, 100% never fail to get an attorney if you are doing a Stokes interview. If you get called in for one, do not go alone to a Stokes interview, because what happens is the couple will be separated and interviewed, but more like interrogated by an immigration officer. The officers that they call in for these types of interviews are usually investigative types. They're law enforcement minded. The people who are drawn to this type of work love to play gotcha. So you're not going to get the friendly guy who wants to approve everybody in a Stokes interview. And what the structure of it is that they're videotaped and the couple will be separated and interviewed separately by the officer. The attorney will be able to be in both of the interviews. And that's why I say have an attorney there, because you've got someone who's in both places who can speak up if the officer isn't asking the questions properly. And that is a thing. That is a thing. I was looking back through one of our own Stokes interview notes that happened earlier this year, and the officer was accusing our clients of lying because one of the questions was, how did you communicate with each other when you were not living together? And one person said WhatsApp, and the other person said their phone. And the officer was accusing them of having a discrepancy. So it's really important to have someone there to clarify when there's an accusation of a discrepancy, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for differing answers between the couple. I'm jumping ahead. I do that. I'll just answer the question you asked me.
I'm like, whoa, I have so many questions about everything that you just said, because it's so much information. But to kind of get us back to the beginning, how does somebody know when they're scheduled for a Stokes interview? Like, that's my first curiosity. Like, does the notice look different? Like, is it specified like this will be a Stokes interview?
It should be. So typically the way it should work is that the couple will already go to their interview and then they get called back. It can definitely be same day, and it can definitely be sprung on people. Because they're so rare, I can't give a lot of data about like 50% of the time, and the other half you don't. I mean, really, I would say less than 1% of applications go through the Stokes interview. But you're supposed to get notification that that's what you're going in for, is the Stokes interview. And what I meant to answer before is that why do people go into Stokes, get pulled into this? It's usually there's a red flag or there's some fraud. Maybe the petitioner, the U.S. citizen spouse or the green permanent resident spouse, has already petitioned for like 3 or 4 other immigrants. There's a pattern developing here. Or they suspect that there's some sort of fraud ring going on. We've seen cases where, notarios were supplying people with fake marriage documents that weren't ever registered with the county. And eventually what will happen is immigration will start catching on that a lot of people are submitting the same type of documents. And then they'll start, before they crack down on everyone, they're going to start investigating and gathering information. And it could also be just that there's something curious about this pair, right? It could be a major age difference, although that's more and more common, going both directions between genders. But I've seen cases where, the husband was an immigrant from a devout Muslim country, and the wife was from a Southern Baptist family. And they're both still practicing their religion. And how does that work? Or they don't speak the same language. Like neither of them speaks the language of the other. Something like that could be the trigger. More often than not, it's something in the file that indicates fraud. And so that's why I say, if you get notification of a Stokes interview, number one action is to call your lawyer if you have one. If not, you can call us. We can help look at the file and see, because what we want to do is dig in and figure out, what are they suspecting here? What's going on before you get to the interview, so you're prepared.
Got it. And sometimes I know we have ran into like, oh, you think you're married, but there's a previous marriage that didn't actually get divorced. Like that kind of stuff can happen, right? Like where it's like you thought you were divorced, but it didn't. You got married again before you got divorced, something like that.
So that happens often, or people never finalized their previous divorce, but they initiated it but didn't get the final whatever stamp. Because sometimes people know that they didn't actually get divorced and they obtain fake divorce documents. There are a number of countries where it can be really difficult to get documents. There's a lot of countries where there's a high amount of corruption and fraud within the government. Immigration knows about that, right? U.S. immigration knows. For example, Nigeria is a country where if an immigrant from Nigeria is applying and they have had a previous marriage, immigration is going to dig into that. Rightly or wrongly, it's the reality. So just understanding which country you come from, how those countries' documents are typically viewed by immigration. And then if you are from a country that gets a higher level of suspicion by immigration officers, doing an extra special deep dive review of those documents and making sure they're all legitimate, because that's the kind of thing you want to catch before you turn it into immigration. Because once they have something in their hands that is fraudulent, it's really difficult to climb back out of that hole with them, because they assume that the applicant was involved in the fraud and they knew all about it, even if you didn't.
Yeah, that's huge. Okay, so then you typically go to your first interview, right? That's scheduled. That's a normal interview. And then if there are any red flags, that's when this Stokes interview happens, right?
Not always. This is
Okay.
where I say nobody, I shouldn't speak for everybody in the world. We don't really know, how often you go to one interview and then you get called back for a Stokes versus it can get sprung on you the date of your interview. I've seen both things happen. So I don't think anyone should assume that you're not going to have a Stokes interview sprung on you. They're supposed to give you notice about it. And I would, as an attorney, argue if we're at an interview and they're all of a sudden doing a Stokes interview, I would argue to have it rescheduled if my clients are surprised by it. Whether or not they would do that, these are all things that could play out. And in green card interview, and this is why you want an attorney with you. This is one of those things where it's, often we talk about this a lot. People say, well, I can look online and research how to fill out the forms and go to the interview. Yes, true. And this is a very big deal for most of the people who are going through the process. And I think it's a wise investment to get an attorney who attends the interview with you, because not all immigration lawyers include that service. And I would say even on the clean and easy cases, it's just a good idea to have an attorney go with you to the interview. And then, I mean, if for nothing else, the peace of mind that someone's sitting there waiting with you in the waiting room. They've told you what documents to bring. They've reviewed them. They make sure everything's in the file. They're sitting there next to you throughout the whole process, just to bring some sort of calm to what can be a very stressful process.
Great. And then here we have an interesting question from Fernando, actually, who's joining from YouTube. And he's asking, if my wife or husband gives false information that I was not aware about and gets caught in the interview, how would this affect me in any future immigration process? My guess is that this is the beneficiary.
Great question. And I've seen this happen. Typically, the way that this has gone down in my experience is things go badly between the couple, and then the U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse is upset, and they feel like they got duped, whether or not they did. They feel like they got tricked by this immigrant into filing for the green card, and it was all about the immigration status. It wasn't really about love. And when they feel like this thing is falling apart, they will often try and tell immigration that the whole thing was a fraud and that the immigrant was just tricking them the whole time. And they can sometimes tell other stuff, like that divorce decree was false or whatever other document was false. I've actually heard this a lot from petitioners when the relationship breaks down. And that definitely will have an impact on the immigrant when that information gets to immigration. I can think of a client that we had where that went down, and this person, it was a valid marriage. It just didn't work out. The citizen spouse was very upset about it, submitted a written affidavit about the whole thing being a fraud, and the immigrant got put into deportation proceedings and didn't have enough time in the U.S. or other relatives to defend themselves and ended up getting ordered deported. So that can go down. And so, I don't know how you prepare against that. One thing I will say is that we talk about VAWA a lot, the Violence Against Women Act, and it's just something to keep in mind that an immigrant who has been subjected to cruelty in their relationship can file for their own green card under VAWA. And once you file a VAWA application, immigration is no longer able to receive information from the abuser. They literally cannot take their phone call. They cannot take their information. It's prohibited by statute. So if you're in a situation as an immigrant where the relationship's breaking down and the petitioner is threatening you to call immigration, act as fast as you can by filing a VAWA application if it's, a true case of cruelty. It doesn't have to be physical violence. It can be emotional violence, financial abuse, controlling behavior. If you're in that situation, file a VAWA application. That will protect you from having them claim that the whole thing was fraudulent.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that information. Okay, so then at this point, somebody's been scheduled for a Stokes interview. What can they do to prepare, or like how would you as an attorney prepare them for this interview?
So here's the part where I say, if you're not in a valid marriage, you cannot prepare for a Stokes interview. Like it's not a fake it till you make it kind of scenario, because there's no list of questions. The officer, remember, these are investigative types, right? And they can ask anything they want, and they're going to ask all sorts of random questions. I just Googled what to expect in a Stokes interview. So there's lots of articles where you can get themes. Here's a list. How did you meet? Where did you go on your first date? How many bedrooms do you have in your home? We've seen people be asked to draw a diagram of the furniture setup in their bedroom that they share. Who cleans the house? On what days is the garbage picked up? Who pays the bills? Do you pay online? Do you write checks? How many windows do you have in your home? What kind of curtains do you have? Who wakes up first? A lot of schedule stuff. Who wakes up first? Where do you go to work? Which car do you drive? What's the work schedule? Who sets the alarm clock? What are your pets? Where did you buy your furniture? How many televisions do you have? How many cars? What's your cell phone plan? Do you have a shared cell phone plan? Who's your cable TV internet provider? What kind of television shows do you watch? Music do you listen to? What kind of appliances do you have? What do you drink in the morning? How often do you eat out? This is one we've seen a lot. Where do you keep your What color is your husband's toothbrush? I think my husband's is white.
What color? Yeah, I was about to ask you, what color is Josh's toothbrush?
Yeah. So, here's the thing. I have been married for 17 years now, and there's a lot of questions that we would get wrong. Because, my husband, bless him, is the garbage person. He does all the garbage stuff. And I actually think it's Thursdays, but there are things that I don't have to think about because he handles it, and vice versa. And the key, I think, for Stokes interviews is not to make something up, because if your answers are even slightly different, that is a mark against you, like WhatsApp versus phone, something that ridiculous. But it could also be, I remember this wasn't our client, but a friend went to a Stokes interview with a couple, and they were asked where they went to eat for their anniversary, where they celebrated their anniversary. And this couple had 2 favorite restaurants that they went to celebrate things. And so one of them said, Applebee's. I'm sure it wasn't Applebee's, but one of them said Applebee's and the other one said Chili's, right? Because they didn't really remember which. It was they had gone there for birthdays and anniversaries, and then they failed the interview because there was a discrepancy. So the key thing is to always say, I don't know, if the answer is I don't know, because it's okay to not remember what restaurant you went to on your anniversary. What's not okay in this process is to give an answer that's different than your spouse. But again, this is why it's great to have an attorney who's in both rooms, because if the officer asks the question differently, then there's someone there who can be like, hang on a minute, you asked him about anniversary and you asked her about birthday. These are not the same questions, and otherwise you don't really have someone doing that, holding the officer accountable. And these are people that really do need to be held accountable, in my experience.
Perfect. And I think Daniel kind of follows up with this question. What happens if you do get nervous and you give a wrong answer?
So I would say on the front end, try not to do that. Everybody gets nervous before an interview. And the key thing, I think, is when you're nervous, first of all, do the things that you know help you or help you regulate. So get up early, go for a walk, do some breathing exercises. Don't drink too much coffee. Like, pay attention to taking care of yourself going into this process. And then when you're sitting in the interview, if you're panicking, then take a moment. It's okay to say, I'm feeling really, really nervous right now. This matters so much to me. And I need to just take a minute to breathe. I need to go to the restroom. I need to take a break. So before you blurt, handle yourself. But if you get in the situation where you have blurted something, as quickly as you can say, you know what? I don't think that was right. I am actually remembering that it was something different. Or I actually just said that, but the truth is I don't really remember. As quickly as you can. I obviously not after you've been called out on the discrepancy. Do it beforehand. So that's my advice there.
Perfect. And is there any type of evidence that folks should bring to this interview, or is any requested of them?
So it could be that you've been called to this interview because you didn't submit enough evidence. And we often have to supplement evidence at the interview, but we like to submit a lot of good faith marriage evidence with our application, because although you only need the required things to get it through the mailroom and through the process, when that officer opens up your folder the morning of the interview, they pull it out and they flip through it. They're making a determination. They're forming an opinion before they ever even lay eyes on you, before they walk out in that waiting room and call you in. We like to set it up so they start this interview believing that this is all on the up and up. So I would say try not to wait until a Stokes interview to really gather all your evidence. Do it before your first interview, or ideally when you submit your application. But I often conceptualize marriage-based interview in terms of like official and unofficial. So the official stuff is better when you can do it, but many couples are brand new, living together. Maybe the immigrant just got to the United States. You don't have a lot of shared bank accounts or credit cards or stuff like that, because maybe you don't even have a social security number yet. But if you do,
not any tax returns,
right? If you have that stuff, it's great. Obviously, number one is shared children, birth certificate of shared children, because people in fake marriages don't tend to have kids together. But that's number one. Tax returns, bank statements of shared accounts, credit cards, any other type of shared account where both your names are registered. Phone, gym, Costco, the list could go on forever. That kind of stuff where you can like log into your account, submit a printout, and it's this official thing that's got both your names on this account. That's great stuff. If you don't have a lot of that, then you kind of got to go the unofficial route, which is letters from friends and family. That's my least favorite kind of evidence, because then I find that the officer will start to dig into the letter, like, oh, it's not notarized, or this is from your mom, or they nitpick about that stuff, and it's just annoying. And try not to go there if you can avoid it. But it could, unofficial evidence could be your Facebook post about your announcement, or Instagram, or even communication records between the two of you in WhatsApp, although sometimes you have to like call out the personal stuff. Photos of you together. And the tip on photos is don't submit a whole giant photo album. Nobody wants to look through your entire photo album, but do gather a selection of photos that are 10 to 15 photos that show you guys in various places, in various times, with various people. So here's us at my cousin's wedding. Here's us on our trip to Yellowstone 2 years later. Here's and it's like demonstrate that there has been a lot of photos in a lot of different places over time, interacting with lots of people. That's the best photo array that you can do. Not just the two of you, out Mount Vanell, the two of you at the roller rink, because theoretically you could bring a bunch of outfits and take a bunch of those types of photos in one single day.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think about like a timeline, like, and I don't know if this is right, but it's like generally like before we got married, like these are a bunch of photos of us. When we got married, the wedding, obviously, you want to document that too as well. And then after you got married, kind of like just to show them that timeline.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And the wedding thing brings up something that comes up a lot. It's super duper duper common not to have had a big giant wedding with all your friends and family there. So many times people in an immigration setup will marry quickly, or you'd marry faster than you otherwise would because you need to work on the green card. And so you maybe, just go to the courthouse. You may even just register a common law marriage, and you may have plans to have your big wedding after you get the green card with all the friends and family. And that's cool. Like, don't stress about that. It's fine. Don't think that you have to demonstrate that you had some big expensive wedding with all these people there in order to qualify. I would say more than half the time that isn't part of the file, is some big giant wedding.
Awesome. And then Kate, how long do these interviews usually take, or what's kind of
Stokes interviews? I was just messaging with the attorneys at the office, like, what's been our experience that other people have done them. And Corey, our legal director, was talking about an interview she had that was 4 hours long. And this was with someone who had a shared child. There were lots of complicating factors in that one, but like, they are exhausting. And so you got to be really ready emotionally and mentally. That's why I say that part about taking care of yourself. Get sleep the night before. Make sure you're rested. You've had a good breakfast. You've taken care of your body and your mind before you go into this gauntlet. Bring a energy bar, that kind of thing. Bring a water bottle.
that we don't have many, I mean, other than like removal defense, we don't really have hearings in our cases, but that's kind of the thought that I'm getting right now, is like these Stokes interviews are almost like hearings where you're like almost up against the judge. I mean, it's not a judge, right? But kind of the same setting and the same like mentality that you have to be in, I think.
Oh yeah, you are being interrogated and the officer is looking to deny you. It's not a friendly person. When you've gotten yourself into Stokes interview territory, you are fighting a battle. You're defending yourself. And it gets ridiculous. Like, I'm looking in our chat right now. And Corey is talking about in the last one that she went to, the questions were super nitpicky. And she's like, I'm not even sure I would have passed these in my own marriage, which has been my experience too. And one of the discrepancies in that case was about what color something was. And obviously people perceive things to be, I don't know, have y'all ever had this fight with someone? You're like, no, that is not black, that is green. Like that kind of thing can come up. And again, that's why you want to have an attorney with you in both of these places, so they can point that stuff out and make the record while it's happening, so that if there's a denial and an appeal and all of that, we can later reference these things.
Awesome. And Kate, what if either the applicant or the petitioner doesn't speak English? Do these interviews happen in their native language, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's just like any other immigration. Well, with USCIS, if you don't speak English, you're expected to bring your own translator. We don't typically do that with Spanish because most of the officers speak Spanish. But if it's some other language, I would say yes, bring your own translator.
Great. And now I kind of want to wrap up the process to ask. So you mentioned earlier, like, this is where you ask people, like, is this a real marriage? What if they tell you, no, it's not? Like, we're just doing it for the papers at that point. Can you withdraw the application, not show up to the interview? What happens at that point?
You can, and I would advise that, right? The moment you really don't ever do that. Don't ever do fake marriage for a green card. It's criminal offense, and it can really hurt everybody, petitioner and beneficiary, forevermore and after. So it's just not a good idea. But if you've done it, I mean, I know people do it, and I know if you're thinking about it, it's because someone else did it and they got through it. Just remember, the longer time goes on, the more information is out there, and we're talking about a federal agency that has access to all sorts of law enforcement federal records that we don't even know about, but they can, at the click of a button, access FBI, DHS, all sorts of records about you. So just don't do it, number one. Number two, if you've done it, stop it as soon as you can. So if you wait till the Stokes interview and you panic, that's the moment to do it. If you're watching this video and you've just mailed your application, this is the moment to do it. You can submit a withdrawal letter. And I would say if you've just submitted the application, you submit a withdrawal notice, it's probably not going to trigger any investigation. If you've been invited to a Stokes interview and you withdraw, you're probably going to be investigated by HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. They're probably going to look into that. And depending on what they have on you, which would be the reason for the Stokes interview, they may pursue you or not. So it's just withdrawing it is not necessarily going to save you, but it's definitely always preferable to continuing the fraud.
Got it. That's very serious.
Super duper serious. Yeah, we're not messing around. Marriage fraud is bad, bad news. But like, marriage is different for different people, right? So traditional, you aren't required to be a traditionalist to get a green card through marriage. And especially in 2022, there's all sorts of creative stuff happening in relationships. But what is required is that the two spouses, be they same sex or, different genders, what have you, that they're both legally able to marry each other, meaning they're not married to anyone else, and that this is a true relationship of love, and it's not solely for an immigration benefit. Now, if immigration is part of the reason, like let's say you're 21 and you wouldn't probably get married at 21 otherwise, but because of immigration, you're doing that, but you still are in love and you plan to live together, that's fine. But if you are friends, you're not ever going to live together. There's no, romantic love there. Don't, get married just for immigration documents. That's too far into the fraud line for comfort.
Great. And then if the couple decides to move forward with the Stokes interview and they get denied, what happens after that if they don't pass that interview?
So there should be we should be able to, I'm trying to think of, I don't think we've had a denial recently. So
those are great news.
Yeah. So I think my guess is you'd get the denial and you'd have a window of time to reopen or to appeal. I'm not 100% sure on that because sometimes, in immigration, there's different types of appeal options depending on the type of case that it is. But it's always really quick, a really quick turnaround, meaning the minute you get a decision, if you haven't had an attorney yet so far, pick up the phone and call the attorney the date you open that envelope. Because most attorneys, ourselves included, in order to do a good job for you, we need as much time as possible on your case.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for sharing all of this information. Before we wrap it up, I do want to give a few shout outs here to Margarita Blancarte, who joined us, Daniel Aguirre, Fernando Juárez, Escobar Yannick, que también nos manda saludos. Saludos, gracias por acompañarnos. And also Onofre González. And then we do have one last question, Kate, here from Teodora Palacios. And they're wondering how long is the whole process taking?
Okay, so I'm pulling up the San Antonio processing time on the I-485. This is something that you always want to sort of check online and see what they're saying. We compare that with our anecdotal experience. And most of our clients are in Central Texas, although we can represent people all over the world. The San Antonio field office is taking about a year, and that's what their system says. 80% of the cases are completed with 11 months. So it's a pretty quick turnaround right now. A lot of offices have different timelines. Houston, for example, can take a while on cases like these. So it's always worth checking the USCIS processing time website, and you're going to enter your form number, which is the I-485. That's the marriage-based green card application. And then your field office where you will be interviewed. And for Waco, Austin, you're going to go to San Antonio. And that's a non-Stokes interview timeline. That's assuming no complications. If you're going to have a Stokes interview, it's probably going to add a few months to the process because you go to that second interview.
Great, thank you so much. And just remember, this is all general advice. We are in no way entering an attorney representation with any of these cases. Or any of the advice that we mentioned. And then also, just a reminder that this is specific to the Stokes interview, everything that we mentioned. It's not necessarily the case for the primary interviews that you're having, which those are way different, I'm assuming, unless...
It might be worth just taking a minute, Fidel, and talking about that. What 99% of the people will experience when you go to your interview is you go in together. You get interviewed by the officer the whole time. They go through all the documents, and it's usually a very light, friendly conversation. So they're usually asking questions like, where'd you meet? Have you met each other's parents? Did you have a wedding? What was that like? And they are sort of getting a feel for the vibe between this couple, but it's usually not super stressful or hard at that type of interview. Most of those interviews are like 20 minutes. So you do want to be ready for the Stokes interview when it happens, but don't assume that's going to happen. And here's the thing, the bottom line is, if you are truly in love and you're really married for love and you're either living together or you plan to live together, you're going to get through it. It's going to be fine. So just give us a call if you want some help, but this is not something to freak people out. But we know that sometimes people have the Stokes interview. Everybody worries that they're going to have the Stokes interview. And so this video is to give you that info, but it's really super rare that people have to go through this process.
Yeah, and I mean, according to USCIS, less than 1% of marriage applications are denied because of fraud. So like you said, 99% of the folks who apply are not going to go through this process at all. So just remember, love will win is what I will take away from this. So
that's a good
cool.
thing to end on.
Yeah, anything else you might want to add before we sign off or before we...
I think we covered it. So have a great day, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And yeah, we'll see you next time.